Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Political Smackdown. I'm Andy Devin, I'm your host this week. We're a little short this week. Westmoreland is a little under the weather, but we've got Mike Fieldback and Betsy Wells with us, so maybe we can talk enough to cover for him. You never do know about Wes. All right, let's get started. We've been talking about county budgets a lot the last couple of weeks, so I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about how local budgets, especially county budgets, are put together. Local government is so different than what I was used to in state government, and it's really unbelievable how different it really is. Mike's our expert on local government because he's the only one that's really spent any time in local government. And Mike, if you would kind of walk us through it, because you know, it's really amazing to me. You've been trying to tell me this for years, and I've just kind of ignored you about it. But really, I was used to it in state government. There really is nobody between the representatives and the senators. We're the ones that actually have to craft it. We talk to department heads. It's nothing to have somebody, the head of DOT, come to your office. We have budget hearings. We have all these people come and they have their folks come present their budgets. I've been in the appropriation room, which is a huge, you've probably have been in it. It is a huge room. It's usually got about half the house in it. And I've been there as late as 2 o'clock in the morning. And the sausage making doesn't look any better at 2 o'clock in the morning than it does 10 o'clock in the morning. So, Mike, if you could just kind of walk us through, and then Betsy and I'll chime in through it.
Well, in North Carolina, most counties and most cities of any size have a council manager, commissioner, manager form of government where they have a professional manager. Cleveland County does, Shelby does, Kings Mountain does, even Bowling Springs does. Now, when you get to your smaller towns, the mayor generally operates as the manager, more or less, but he has to get concurrence of the council. So in Cleveland County in 159.9, I don't know if you're going to put that up at
We
some
are right
point.
there.
There it is. Basically, there is a budget officer. And in counties and cities that have a professional manager and a council manager or commissioner manager form of government, he is the budget officer or she is the budget officer. And they start early in the calendar year. It's a 5 or 6 month process to get a budget for the following year. And that budgets all begin in North Carolina and local government, just like the states, on July 1. Now the difference is, Andy, the cities and counties generally get their budgets adopted before June 30th.
That's a novel concept. But you know, one thing I thought was interesting in this, there's one person in county government cannot be the budget officer, and that's the sheriff.
Yeah, even if you don't have a manager, the sheriff can't be the budget officer. I guess that's because you don't want to pass a budget at the point of a gun.
Well, but wouldn't it be interesting if Alan Norman was the budget officer?
It'd be expensive.
I wonder what we would have required.
You know, Sheriff Norman, that was Mike that said that. It wasn't anybody else.
He'll say he's not surprised. He and I've had a few conversations. So the manager meets, generally speaking, with his department heads, and he gets the wish list, I call it. That's my term. He gets what they call their needs. Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you as a former elected official, he gets their needs and their wants. And he has to make some decisions because he's generally going to have a city council or a county commission that is not going to be willing to charge enough taxes to fund everything everybody wants. And so he generally meets with the department heads. The manager will weed out some of the wants because the manager works for the board. And he knows what the board wants because he's having conversations with them at the same time. Early in the year, most of these counties, including Cleveland, they have what's called a budget retreat, work sessions, whatever you want to call it. Used to be, Andy, back in the old days, they went off to Asheville or the beach or somewhere and did them, but now there's been so much public outcry about how much money they spend doing that, they might about all do them locally now.
Locally.
And so that's where it all begins, and the manager is required by statute to present a balanced budget. It's generally done in either mid to late May or early to mid June. In a reval year, it's a little bit later because you're working with appeals and reevaluation. And it's the toughest, I think, in a reval year, especially one like we've just had. So he has individual conversations with the mayor in the cities, the chairman in the counties, the others. He can meet 2 at a time in the county, 3 at a time in the city without having a majority and not be before public. But if they're going to have a commission budget session, it has to be open to the public.
Let me stop you right there if I can. Betsy, do you have a question?
Well, I just thought that because of the open meetings
The
law.
open meetings law, if you have a majority of the board discussing the county or the city's business, it has to be before the public.
Well, and this goes back to a question I have, and I talked to Kevin Gordon, our county chair, that I can remember back in the early 90s, I attended some of these, and they actually met, all 5 of them at one time, with the county manager in place, all 5 of them, and they heard directly from the department heads. And I just assumed that was kind of what they still did. And Kevin was very kind and educated me on how things were done now. And I don't know why they were done at that time, because I don't think this budget officer statute was anything new.
No, it's not new.
And I didn't understand why they did it that way.
Well, where I served in Shelby, the manager met with his department heads. He may bring a department head in to explain something that they were collectively doing. But what happens is the manager weeds out the wants that he knows are probably not going to get approved. And generally, you don't want to put those before the board to put the board on the spot. And most managers, remember this, in our manager forms of government for counties and cities, generally speaking, those department heads work for the manager. The manager works for the commission or the council. And so, you know, I can't tell you how many times people call me to complain about this department or that department, and I'd say, have you talked to the city manager yet? Now, there is a point at which you can bring a board into it if nobody's getting any help after they go through the proper channels first. But the general rule of thumb is the manager and the department heads start forming a budget to present to the commissioners.
Well, and that was my next question, is there a mechanism in place to where that department head could possibly be called by the board, the elected officials?
If that's what the commission wants to hear from and they ask the manager to bring them, or if the manager thinks they need to, either side could make that happen in a circumstance that called for it, in their opinion. Nothing unlawful about it, but it's technically the manager dealing with the commission and the manager dealing with the department heads. That's generally the way it works. They then have to eventually come to a budget. In this case, in Cleveland County, we know that the board made it clear to the manager in a reevaluation year they wanted one that met that statutory definition of revenue neutral, which includes some growth for how much your tax base grew, you know, in the average year between revals. And so he got to that kind of a budget. He presented it. At that point, the commission or the council, they can change that budget. And they have to give instructions to the manager to make us a budget that works by changing A, B, and C. And if they have a majority of them want to do it, then the manager's got to do it.
Does this have to be done in an open meeting?
Yes, that would have to be done in an open meeting.
So
now, they can talk
so
2
the
on
public
2,
would
and the
know
manager can know how 3 of them feel, and it may not be public.
Right.
But if there's more than 2 in the case of a 5-member commission, it has to be a public meeting to talk about budgetary things. Only things you can do in closed, and you even have to announce closed sessions, and you have to state what statute under which you can go into closed session. And budgets are not one of them. You got to vote on budgets in open session, and you should discuss
Well,
them
it's
in
the
open
people's
session.
money.
So that's what happened here this year. The reason it's controversial this year is because the reval was so out of whack compared to the one we had the last 2 times. In 2016, there wasn't any increase, if you remember. In fact, the cities in this county went down some, or one, Shelby did, in 2016, up some in 2020, 21. But they're up like this time in a lot of places, with the average being 55% before appeals. But we all know of things that went up 75, 80, 100, 200, and even more percent. And so it makes it tough because it doesn't matter where that revenue neutral rate, as it's called, is set, a lot of people are going to get a tax increase that year. It's the system, not the commissioners, that are to blame for that. and it's just the way it is. And it's really the market ultimately. You know, if you live in a part of the county where there's been little activity, values didn't go up as much. If you live where what they call the heat map is, where they see this part of the county had all these developments and the prices got bid through the roof, then they're going to get a higher tax value.
Like around Betsy's
Like
house.
about around my house.
Well, and then a lot of Shelby. Shelby was
Shelby.
pretty hot on the heat map this time because for the first time, look how much development has been in and around Shelby
And in Kings Mountain.
and around the casino
Yes.
especially.
Well, I mean, I'm seeing building going on in places in Shelby, like Gardner Street and down around Ligon Street, places that hasn't seen any new construction in decades. And who would have ever thought it, Mike? And there's all kind of new construction and a lot of heavy remodeling going on. That's got to drive the prices up.
So that's the basic process.
So, I mean, but, well, Betsy, got any questions?
Well,
You'd
just
like to-
that whenever the commissioners are elected by the people to take care of our money, and of course, it's their responsibility to look at the budget and see what would be the best they think for the county, as well as to fund everything that they want to fund and yet keep the prices down. And I think that if they have a question and they want to change something, that it's imperative that they bring it forward, even if maybe the total board does not agree with it.
It's still sausage making. It's just less people involved in it at the local level than at the General Assembly.
Well, and that General Assembly, let's face it, you've got a press corps sitting there. You've got TV cameras around. I mean, you've got everybody, everything that goes on. There's a ton of people watching. I mean, and you know, there's nothing can be hid. Nothing. It's all out there. But the other question I got too is, Mike, and I've had a couple of folks ask me, could the budget at this point be reopened? I don't think it could be at this point.
Well, one of the people, I guess before June 30th, I'm not sure about that either. I guess before June the 30th, if one of the people that voted in the majority
Favor.
wanted to reconsider, I suppose that could be done if it's done before June 30th. But come midnight on June 30th, you got to have a tax rate for next year. So you can get a tax bill by the 1st of August.
I can only imagine what a train wreck if that were to happen. Oh my goodness!
If you're in the minority, you cannot make a motion to reconsider, but whether there's a different statute that governs a budget, I'm not sure. I do know this, on lots of things, like our zoning things we used to do, to pass it on one reading, it took a 2/3 majority, which in Shelby's case was 4 out of 6. If it was 3-3 and the mayor broke the tie, then you had to vote again not less than 10 days later, or more than so many days. But on a budget, it only takes one vote, even if it is, like in County's place, a 3-2 majority. There is no second vote required on a budget.
Okay.
Well, I just can't imagine anything. I just can't imagine anybody would even want to think about trying to undo anything like this.
Well, I am sure our two good people that are members that didn't vote for the budget would like to change a few things. I'm sure I'd like to change a few things.
I know I would.
But in terms of how much it's going to cost the taxpayers, given the revow, you couldn't have changed enough to make a lot of difference.
I don't think you could too. And then you also got a timeline of things that have to be coming up that has to be met. I mean, that the county has no choice about. There are things coming up, just like you said. A tax rate has to be set, and it has to be set for all county-wide.
This is not the week to get into it, but I know there are some people in the county, and maybe one or two or more on it, maybe even some on the commission voted for it, I don't know. But there are things done locally with local money that are not absolutely necessary, but people want and did and do, that other people think really need to be looked at and changed.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that can be done. But even if you cut a whole $1 million out here, it'd make less than a penny's difference on the tax rate.
Yeah, and I mean, and now, but the time to do that is while the budget's being
During that
formed.
month from January to May.
Yeah. So anyway, folks, I hope you've learned a little something. I know I have. And that is how the sausage is made, according to Mike Philbeck.
Well, that's a broad, reasonably accurate overview, but I'm sure there's a little bit of nuance there that I'm not aware
Well,
of.
and I'm
some
sure,
things
I'm
have
sure it
changed.
is, because it is an extremely complicated process that county commissioners and in the city government has to go through. And it's tough. I mean, it is. And there's a ton of statutes they have to meet to stay on the right side of the law. So it is tough for them to do. But anyway, we're going to have to take a break, and we'll be right back with the second half of Political Smackdown.
Looking for a smarter start to your future? Welcome to Cleveland Community College, where big dreams begin close to home. Whether you're launching a new career, transferring to a four-year university, or building skills to level up, Cleveland Community College gives you the power to go further without the big price tag. With small class sizes, real-world training, and programs in healthcare, advanced manufacturing, IT, and more. We're here to help you succeed from day one. Affordable, accredited, and all about you. Enroll today and take your next step at Cleveland Community College.
And welcome back to Political Smackdown. Mike, I think your bout's going to be the Mike Philbeck show today. I'm coming back to you. You know, we've talked about the budget and about how it affects, you know, everything about it in the county. But you've been talking to me about some things you've been watching in other counties and about how it's affecting a whole lot of other people around in the state and with reval, and that's how it's affecting their budget. Can you kind of give us an idea of what's going
Let's
on?
drop back a year. Last year, Rutherford County, Burke County, Catawba County, Gaston County, Cabarrus County, all in our region, had revals. And we had Republican, and they're all Republican boards. I mean, I don't mean majority Republican, I mean all Republican boards
yes.
as a general rule, kind of like Cleveland now. And we had one or more incumbents defeated in Republican primaries in the reval year. And it's got to be because after COVID and these values shot through the roof and people realize even at the lower rate that most of them were doing. I know Burke County, for example, went like 2 cents below revenue neutral. The manager up there told me, who used to be manager here, Brian Epley, he still had an incumbent chairman to get beat. The chairman got beat by Larry Pittman in Cabarrus County. And it was because they lowered the rate from way on up in the 60s or low 70s down to like 57, but revenue neutral a little below that, and they had even bigger increase on a percentage in Cleveland. And he'd been there 12 years and got beat. There's a little bit of a tax revolt going on. And people are getting bigger bills after these revals, and they really don't care about the process,
That's
the
right.
system. All they care about is when
Yes.
they open that bill,
Yes.
and it's 30 or 40% higher than last year because their value went up a lot. That's all they see.
And they don't plan to sell their land.
And so it's
Yes.
causing issues. And I mean, I know some folks that, I mean, I've got some properties that they went up so much that it's going to make, in one case of mine, if Shelby adopts the rate the manager's proposed, I got one house that the county tax, it over right at doubled in value. So even if the county's revenue neutral, there's like a 40 or 50% increase in the county tax. And if the city doesn't go to revenue neutral, instead of that much, there's going to be a 60 or 70% increase on what Rick's proposed. But that one that I know of, it's going up $67 a month at what's currently probably going to happen in Shelby just for property taxes. That's a good bit.
Well, and you know now what they're doing in Kings Mountain. They passed their budget this week.
Yeah, and they left it at 48 cents, and so they're going to have a ton of people that are going to be really upset when they get their bill.
Well, and that's the thing of it, Mike.
They didn't lower it a penny, in other words. the rate.
When you have reval like we've had, even if it's, quote, revenue neutral, quote unquote, it's still going up in places. It has to. I mean, it's just, that is the market driven part of it that people don't understand.
You know, you can't know all this 4 years ago when you ran for county commission in some of these counties. But this is the bad cycle
Yes, it is.
to be running, is right after they get much larger tax bills.
I think if it were me, I think I would have.
I'm talking about for an incumbent that voted for it.
I think I would say, thank you. I'm glad I was of service to my county. I think it's time for me to retire.
My family needs me.
Yeah,
But-
I need to go play golf, or I need to fish, or I need to do something else.
And even though you know about that there is a process and there's bills and laws that you have to go by, when it comes down to that bill that you open up in August and you see that price,
Yeah.
the only people you think of are the people that voted for that budget.
That's exactly right.
And I don't care how long they've been there. You know, when you go down to the tax office and you write that bill for like maybe maybe a lot of money more than last year, like what your one house is, Mike, then somebody, you know, you're going to blame somebody.
And if
so
you don't know who they are, you're going to find out who they are.
Yes, you are. And at that time, you're not looking maybe it's at Democrat or Republican.
Well, and you know, the first time you ever run, you can point that out about the incumbent you may be running against, and you can make a lot of hay.
Oh,
out of it.
yes, that's always something you can
Ain't
do.
politics wonderful?
That's why I'm glad I'm retired. Well, let's see what happens on it. But anyway, all right, let's go to our next question. I got this one just for you, Betsy, because I know
Okay.
you want to say something. Streets of Los Angeles have seen days of rioting over ICE arrest. The National Guard and Marines have been ordered in by the president. We're in territory not covered since the 60s civil rights era. Where are we now, and what let's be honest, has the president overreacted some by sending in the Marines?
Of course he has. And if any of you were watching the TV earlier in the week before this happened, there was a clip of President Trump falling as he went up the steps of Air Force One. And if that had been Joe Biden, it would have been all over the news circuit for the next week, and about how he was getting so feeble. But the process, and our Constitution allows people to protest, and peaceful protests. And there's protests that will be all over America this coming Saturday, the No Kings protest, except in Washington, where there will be that military parade at the cost of millions of dollars to taxpayers.
About 45 million.
Yes, and I was in Washington the last couple of days lobbying for a Medicare group, and I saw, you know, the barriers going up, and there are going to be tanks and all these machinery that you have never seen. You know, we've seen parades in Washington where people march, but we've never seen like all these military vehicles like some of the dictators have used over the years. But no, Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass had this under control. They did not ask for the 4,000 troops to be brought in from the National Guard and 700 from, I mean, these are our military. This is not just police. And even the head of the police force there in Los Angeles said there was not a need for this. And so now you've got Governor Newsom has gone and asked for injunction to stop this. And what they're doing, they're just sort of, the military is, they're sleeping, the poor military is sleeping like on the floor of buildings and in the basement. And you know, we're getting into dangerous territory when you put our military force out on the streets against our citizens. And first, President Trump said it was to help the rioters. Well, the Los Angeles police force says they've got that under control. And most of it is peaceful. Now, there have been some that have burned cars and they've been arrested, and they should be prosecuted. But no, it's been overreacted, and I think it's just about and I think it's not going to be just there in Los Angeles. I see across the country in the blue cities, you're going to see this move forward. And what does this mean? What's this mean for our Constitution? Is the president going to be able to just put forth our military against our domestic people? And ICE, the way they're moving in and collecting people without due process. And yes, I know Joe Biden's administration was deporting more at this time last year, and so it's got to be ramped up. No, it's not good. No, it's not good for the public. They have not asked for it, and the president has overreached.
Mike?
Betsy, you're playing right into Trump's hands like a lot of left-wing Democrats, because this is his most popular issue, is he's going to get rid of the illegals. There's been a 40-point swing in the Latino vote in America towards Trump.
We'll see
And
how
that's
it
why,
happens. We'll see.
and there was violence, and that's why I did it.
There
and
was
let's
some
face
violence,
it,
and
Andy, you
1
mentioned the
mile
civil rights
square
movement.
mile.
You mentioned the civil rights movement. Who was the president that sent troops to Alabama?
Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson, to force George Wallace to integrate the University of Alabama, and that seemed to work out all right. And who sent the National Guard and/or troops to Southern California in 1991 after the Rodney King incident?
I believe that was
George H.W. Bush.
Bush.
So this is not unprecedented.
Yes, it is.
And it has happened
It
before.
is.
If it's happened before, then it's not unprecedented by definition.
But
Betsy.
what is the outcome going to be, Mike?
We're
What
going
do you
to
see
get
that?
rid of the illegals. That's
No,
what
that is-
Trump campaigned on.
wait
And
and
he's not
see.
going to put up with violence. And I'm telling you, you're paying into. I've even heard this on CNN. They've been warning on CNN the Democrats to quit overplaying their hand on this.
Well, but you've got
Just
to
keep
do
on.
something. And there's even going to be a protest here in Shelby on Saturday.
a
no
peaceful
Kings
protest is all right. 1 square
Yes,
mile
a
of LA was
peaceful
burning.
protest.
And they were ransacking businesses of legal Latinos.
And it stopped. And there were like
Only
50
after
some
Trump-
people.
only after
No,
Trump acted.
The LA police people were taking care of it.
No, they were
did
not.
not have the
It was not being taken care of. That's why
the
Trump had
troops
to do
have
something.
not have. What are the troops doing in there?
Right now, they're just waiting to
They're
see.
just waiting. They are waiting. And the National Guard is not being paid because they did not go through the formal process of bringing them forward. And so they're there just giving of their time and energy.
Well, I think one person said they were supposed to just stand there and look mean.
And look mean with their guns.
All right, folks, let's go to our lightning round. Mike, what you got for us?
Well, Mr. Dedman, you're the market person, but I've been noticing something.
What's that?
A year ago, gold was $2,300 an ounce. It's $3,300 now.
Yes, it is.
What does that tell us it may be in the short-term future?
Well, it has been up 37.
Yeah. But does that signify that that's the store of value and recession may be coming?
Could be.
I don't know, but it is interesting how much gold has risen in a year.
But it has started slipping back down a little bit, so I don't know. All right, Betsy.
All right. This past week, I was called to Washington to I took off my partisan hat, and I lobbied our representatives and senators on behalf of Medicare, the Coalition for Medicare Choices, since there's a concern that maybe Medicare may be on some of the chopping block too. But Representative Moore was very friendly. He even brought us into a conference room, answered all of our questions, and really appreciated his listening to the concerns. But he said that he felt that the Medicare was not going to be touched.
Well, this week the music did die. Brian Wilson, one of the greatest music geniuses of our time, passed away at 82. He wrote all the great songs for the Beach Boys, Good Vibrations, California Girls, and it just goes on and on. And, when Elton John tells you that he was the genius behind a lot of his songs, Bob Dylan says the same thing, Paul McCartney says the same thing. That tells you a lot about the influence that Brian Wilson had. We're going to miss him more than you ever know, but what a legacy he leaves behind. Folks, that's all the time we got this week. Hope you learned a little something, and we'll be back again next week with a new edition of Political Smackdown.